Now that we have a physics service available in the application, it's time to take a look at what we can do with it. According to the tutorial, there's a few things we need to do with that physics service. We'll need that service to create a world. We do that by invoking physics and passing in a function where physics.js will create a world and pass it into the function. And then we need to take that world and give it somewhere to render. What the tutorial is doing is setting up a canvas so that we can create a renderer and tell the world to render into that canvas. And since we're working with an HTML element here, the first thing that comes to mind to me is that I want to create a custom directive. To me, the ideal custom directive for this would look something like this. I want a physics canvas. I want to be able to specify the width and height, and then I just want the directive behind this to be able to set all of this up for me. And then ultimately, what I want to do is be able to somehow specify shapes that I can attach to this canvas. So it's almost turning into SVG, but before we can get there, we have to create this canvas. I already have a file included in the shell page. It's going to be the file that returns the directive definition object for physics canvas. And I think physics canvas, since I ultimately plan on having some child elements like rectangles or some sort of physics shape, I want to restrict this to being used only as an element. And I'll probably at some point need to transclude in any content that was included in the physics canvas. We'll see that in a bit when we start adding shapes. I'm going to use a template URL. For this directive, I want it to load templates, physics canvas.html. That is actually a file that I already have created. Currently, all it has is canvas, and it's going to set in the width and the height, and I expect those to be on the scope. That's why I have the data binding expressions there. And since I'm also specifying that I want to do some transclusion, I should also, inside of here, have a div with the ng transclude directive on it. We did some transclusion earlier in this course when we built a custom alerts directive. But now I know that I want width and height to be members of my scope object. So let's set up an isolated scope. I want width to come from an attribute named width. I want height to come from an attribute named height. And now let me write a link function. So because physics is now a service, I should now be able to inject that service into my directive. And I should be able to use it in my linking function where I take scope and an element. What I will have to do is find the canvas that is in my template URL. So let me use query selector on the element that represents my directive and ask for a canvas. And then let me use some of the code that is right here in the tutorial to create a renderer. So a renderer is a physics.renderer. I'm going to tell it that it's going to render into a canvas. And then I provide some options that say this, in fact, is the canvas element you're going to use. You will be using scope.width for the width. And for height, you'll be using scope.height. And that will complete my renderer. Now I just need to set up the world. So if I invoke physics and pass it a function that takes a world parameter, then I should be able to say, world, please add this renderer. And so far, this is all we need to do with our physics canvas, but let's look at declaratively adding in some shapes onto that canvas in the next clip.